Hang on, I had a out in the Queen City, eating chili and getting indigestion, no doubt. And also football, the other football, the Saturday football that sometimes sort of comes and goes around here. And certainly this Saturday didn't come and go as the Terps went down to Texas and did the Longhorns dirty. This guy usually talks baseball with us. He is a baseball insider in the Chicagoland area. But at Bleacher Report, he also covers some Big Ten football, basketball, and other things for V Sport. I'll also host a pretty cool Big Ten podcast because out in Chicago, there are two things, right? There's baseball and the Cubbies, and there's also that Big Ten thing. Seth Gruen joining us here from Bleacher Report. We welcome him back on. You can follow his journey on Twitter at Seth Gruen. How about those Turtles, huh, Seth Gruen?
Yeah, look, I mean, well, I could say from a regional standpoint, from a conference standpoint, what happened in Austin is sort of what Jim Delaney envisioned when he expanded out east or further east into the D.C. Metro, Baltimore, and New York markets, and that he envisioned a scenario in which Maryland athletics was able to sort of lead the charge or lead the news cycle, and I think that's what we're seeing this past week, even with the NFL getting ready to gear up. From a program standpoint, I think you look at that game and you circle it as a program builder. Certainly competing in the East Division, which is the most competitive in college football, Maryland has an uphill climb. But, you know, if you look at this as a 3 or 4 year plan, what DJ Durkin is doing, this is a program builder, and this is going to open the eyes of some recruits who might be considering Virginia or some of the other area schools that typically, you know, won those recruiting battles. I think that now they'll probably consider Maryland. And, you know, people have varying opinions on what Texas should be. Some think Texas was vastly overrated, but I think they have the talent in place. Tom Herman inherited the talent to be a double-digit win team. And when you consider what the point spread was, I think it was 18.5. What Maryland was able to do was probably the shock of week 1 of college football.
Oh, all the way around, and it certainly reflects well upon the conference, but it's also a wild week where the Michigans play the Floridas and Harbaugh gets his points. Obviously, Florida State goes and tries to slay the Giant and can't. It's very, very tough to get a sunburn week 1, and especially if you're a program like Texas with a new coach and 89,000 people, and to get beaten by this sort of upstart team that hasn't won those kinds of games. That's part and parcel of scheduling these games, and I know that game was scheduled during the Ralph Friedgen era, going back now 2 coaches. And, the Durkin goes in there and does this incredible thing that now sort of awakens everyone here and probably awakens Ohio State and Michigan and, the Wisconsins, the Minnesotas that are on the Terps schedule this year, that this is a formidable football team right now. And there's no way of knowing that till they actually go out there and play.
Yeah, well, you can't sleep on Maryland, and obviously they have a high-powered offense. Ty Johnson is one of the elite running backs in the conference, though he probably doesn't get the same kind of ink that the Mike Webbers do, or the J.K. Dobbins, or even the Akram Wadleys and the Justin Jacksons. But he deserves all the publicity that he gets. And look, again, I certainly think that Maryland has awoken not just the Big Ten, but the rest of the country up to what they're capable of doing. And, I think they're going to be certainly a nuisance in the East. I wouldn't call them a competitor, obviously, but they're no gimme. And I was really, really impressed with what they were able to do on Saturday.
Seth Gruen joining us here. He's usually talking baseball, but he does. Tell me what you do with the Big Ten and your podcast. We can promote that because we do have a lot of Terps fans out there that are always sniffing around for what's going on with Minnesota and Northwestern and Wisconsin and these teams we have on our schedule in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that the goal of the podcast really is to serve an underserved fan base. I think that we see a lot of news about the SEC and a lot of championing of that fan base, and that's in part due to the SEC network and the deal they have with ESPN, and also partially because there's really nothing else going on in that part of the country with the exception of maybe the Saints and a couple of the NFL teams in Florida. And obviously the Big Ten competes with some bigger markets like Chicago and Minnesota, and you talk about D.C. and Baltimore, where there's some professional sports going on that sometimes take away from the attention that the Big Ten otherwise would get if it were in a different part of the country. But the reality is the fandom is just as rabid. I live in Chicago, the heart of Big Ten country, and you walk downtown on a Saturday and you see people in the Iowa shirts, in the Illinois shirts, the Michigan State shirts.
I've been there on Saturdays. It is something. It really is cool. I mean, there's a college football blood kicking through Chicago that you talk about Atlanta and the state of Texas and Florida and these other places. Boy, it's a real hodgepodge in Chicago. And every bar has a different school, right? There's a Wisconsin bar, there's a Michigan bar, there's an Indiana bar. There's a bar for everybody, right?
Absolutely. There's a thirst for this, not just in college football and basketball, and I think we've proven that. The podcast has done very well. We have 3 sponsors on right now, mybookie.ag, a website called Draft that's kind of flipping the script on daily fantasy football or weekly fantasy football, and SeatGeek. So we're getting a great listenership. We talk Maryland football a ton, and we make our rounds around the conference, and hopefully, again, we're serving a community that's really underserved and feel like we're certainly filling a vacancy in the coverage of sports at large.
Seth Gruen joining us here from Bleacher Report. He's a contributor there as well as a Big Ten Unfiltered on V-Sporto. You can follow him out on Twitter at Seth Gruen. That's Gruen. Dude, I saw you broke out the blue in the World Series gear and made it out to the friendly confines. I saw that on your Twitter page about a week ago with your buddy there. Look, man, we're in Baltimore. We're in a real pennant race here, right? The Yankees are in town. We're going to Cleveland this weekend, playing the best team in the land here, at least over the last couple of weeks. What's going on in Houston with the Storm, with Verlander? This is a wild month, and, we have as good of a pennant race based on this second wild card that one of these teams is going to win the rights to either go to New York or, who knows, maybe Fenway Park at this point. Certainly the Yankees have proven themselves to be pretty pesky here thus far, right?
Yeah, look, it's kind of a hodgepodge, and it's been that way for the last 6 weeks or so, where it appeared like, hey, there could be a lot of teams, come the end of September in this race, and it's anybody's guess right now. But I like the Yankees again. I'll reiterate that they were my pick to make it out of the American League and into the World Series, and I'll stick with them, but as far as that second wild card, you're right. It's going to be tremendous theater down the stretch.
Seth, for you with the baseball side of this and picking a team, and I know, 2 weeks ago it might have been the Mariners, 3 weeks ago it might have been the Angels. Certainly the Twins have hung out in this thing. I think this could be a nightmare at the end of the month. I mean, there could be 2, 3, 4 teams tied just for that spot to try to figure out who's then going to New York or Boston, and they might have their own catfight because there's so much inbreeding in the schedule here, right? I mean, all these teams will see each other inside division, and this thing's been such a game or two apart for the better part of a month, and I don't see any separation happening here over the next couple of weeks. None of these teams want to win more than 2 or 3 in a row.
Yeah, and as I've said before, well, I agree. And as I've said before, there's a reason the baseball season's 162 games. It's because any team can beat another on any single day, and that's because pitching is such an overwhelmingly dominant element of the game, pitching and defense. All that said, when you get closer and closer to the end of that season and you have all these teams bunched up, you leave a lot more to randomness. So even though there might be one team, that has the better pitching or that's hitting better, a bloop single could determine this thing. That's how crazy close it is. Now, I will say this about the Twins. I have to say that they may be one of the most impressive teams that we've seen this year, just based on expectations. I think if we had this conversation a year ago, you'd say that Minnesota kind of needs to pivot in this rebuild, and perhaps they miscalculated on some of their prospects. But I think Byron Buxton has rebounded and shown why he was considered the best prospect in baseball just a few years ago. And you're right, they find themselves in this thing, and I don't think you would have been able to find anybody who would have said the Twins would be a contender for that wild card. But, here we sit in early September, and they're just that.
Tell you what, Colorado's fallen back to the pack, and Arizona has surged now. That game will be played out in Arizona pretty obviously, but Colorado's gotten a little slippery here, and here come the Milwaukee Brewers all of a sudden, and the Cardinals aren't far behind either, really.
Yeah, look, I give the Brewers a lot of credit, too, for what they've done. Again, another team that I think you had confidence in the way they were rebuilding that team, especially after they were able to orchestrate some trades with the Astros and really overhaul, or I shouldn't say overhaul, but add to their system by getting some really, really good prospects. They're certainly a year or two ahead of where you expected them to be. Kind of the same boat the Cubs were in back in 2015, where you expected things to just start percolating, and boom, they snuck in there in that wild card, and that could be the same case for the Brewers. I think the best is yet to come for them, but it wouldn't shock me at this point if they did sneak into that wild card, because on the National League side, it's pretty competitive too.
Seth, always great to have you on. I know your time is short. Good luck with the Big Ten podcast. Plenty to talk about in Terps land as well as Big Ten land as some of these bigger games get going here and we get into the meat of the schedule. I know you'll be monitoring baseball and wild card races as well. Always a pleasure, man.
Appreciate it.
Seth Gruen from Bleacher Report in the Chicagoland area joining us here. I didn't even get him to jump on all things Cubs and buy into all that. But we'll have plenty of time for that before October as we'll catch up with him a little later on in the month as well. We're going to be at Cincinnati this weekend, all things football and all eyes at 1 o'clock on how Joe Flacco is going to perform, how this young Ravens defense is going to perform. Luke's on the backfields in Owings Mills all week long. We'll have all the sound for you as well as Oriole coverage from Oriole Park at Camden Yards as they move to Northern Ohio and Cleveland on the weekend, and the Ravens go to Southern Ohio and Cincinnati, Ohio on Sunday. Terps, Towson this week. We'll be talking about that all week, as well as the Terps' incredible victory in Texas, down in Austin, amongst the Burnt Orange and the Hook'em Horns. Nasty at WNST.net does find me. I am a very available individual. I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and of course we stream live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget, our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Breaking news happens first on our WNST tech service. That is all powered up by Coons Ford, Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home. He is excited about talking about real football. I had him on the show a little earlier this week. Plenty of guests on. Luke and I will also be appearing with him on Thursday as the SSV on WNST. Don't forget, if you're headed to London, we are doing a special event on Saturday afternoon from 11 until 2:52. We're going to be drinking some pints, eating some fish and chips, some mushy peas, which are my favorite, by the way. Don't want to stand downwind of me as we go to Westminster Abbey later that evening, but they are tasty and delicious, and we'd love to see you at our party. It's at the Fox at XL in the Docklands area. All the information's up on the website. You can toss me a note, email, Facebook, however you want to get to me, but it'll all be up there. Saturday from 11 to 3. It's right off the tube. Then we are marching 2 blocks to the Emirates Air. We are taking the cable car across the River Thames over to the O2 Arena. It's going to be lovely, and some food and drink and beverage are going to be involved. There's no charge, no ticketing. Just come as you are. Just wear some purple so we can identify you. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and anything you miss you can find in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Podcast is what the kids are calling it these days. I just call it radio and great conversations. It's what we do. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.